On the morning of the 3rd of June, 1992, a private charter boat departed from a dock just outside Naples, Florida. Aboard were 31 graduating seniors from Gulf Shores Academy, 4 of their teachers, and a local boat captain hired by the school. The destination was a small, uninhabited island in the Gulf of Mexico, known only by its coordinates and a nickname passed around among locals, Anchor Cay. The trip was meant to be a celebration, a final goodbye. The students had been planning the outing for months. Parents had signed waivers. Teachers had stocked supplies. The plan was simple. 2 nights camping on the beach. No phones, no distractions. Just the class of 92, a few trusted chaperones, and a remote island to make memories. The boat was scheduled to return by noon on the 5th of June, and it did, right on time. But there were no students on board, just the 4 teachers and the captain. When the boat pulled in, school administrators and several waiting parents immediately knew something was wrong. One teacher was sitting on the deck with his head in his hands. Another stood near the bow, staring blankly at the water. The captain didn't respond when the dock manager called to him. Within 20 minutes, police were called. None of the adults on the boat could explain what had happened. All they could say again and again was, "We don't remember." When questioned separately, their stories were consistent in the most unsettling way. They remembered arriving near the island, anchoring offshore, preparing to disembark, and then nothing. Just fragments. The next memory they had was waking up on the boat, already heading back toward the mainland. Initial toxicology reports showed no drugs or alcohol in their systems. No signs of trauma. No signs of dehydration, malnourishment, or even sunburn. The captain, a seasoned Gulf sailor named John Meade, had worked charters for over 30 years. His logbook, usually detailed to the hour, was blank, just 2 dates written in shaky handwriting. The 3rd of June, the 5th of June. Inside the boat, investigators found no gear, no food supplies, no sleeping bags, coolers, backpacks, or water containers. It was as if nothing had ever been loaded. And yet the school had receipts. Photographs taken before departure showed the students smiling, waving, helping load tents and bags onto the vessel. They had been there, but now they were gone. Over the following days, helicopters flew over Anchor Cay. Boats were dispatched. Divers searched the surrounding waters. But there were no footprints, no trash, no tent pegs, no ashes from a campfire. Nothing. Not a single trace. One parent, David Renner, whose daughter Kristen was among the missing, said later in an interview, "It was like the island swallowed them, or like they never made it there at all." But the boat's GPS showed clearly they had stopped near the island for over 36 hours. Whatever happened there, if they ever made it ashore, remains unknown. That was over 30 years ago, and no one has ever come back. The initial search effort was aggressive. Local police, U.S. Coast Guard, and even volunteers from nearby towns joined in. For the first 72 hours, the waters around Anchor Cay were combed with drones, sonar, divers, and thermal cameras. Nothing. The island itself, just under 11 acres of dense foliage and rocky shoreline, was completely untouched. Not a single footprint, no broken branches, no signs of recent human activity. It looked as if no one had set foot there in months. Yet the GPS data didn't lie. The boat had been anchored less than 400 feet off the northern shore for nearly 2 days. A shallow inlet on that side seemed the most likely place they would have landed. Investigators found a patch of disturbed sand the rest scattered, uneven but no tracks leading in or out. The tide, they assumed, had washed away the rest. But then they found something. Roughly 30 feet inland, partially hidden beneath a fallen tree, a police officer discovered a single shoe, a white Reebok sneaker, caked in sand. Inside it, a faded name written in black marker, J. Riley. Jenna Riley was a senior, one of the top students at Gulf Shores. Her parents confirmed it was hers. The shoe was the only physical piece of evidence recovered on the entire island. Back on the mainland, the pressure mounted. news outlets picked up the story. 31 seniors missing after graduation trip ran on the front page of the Tampa Bay Tribune. CNN aired a short feature. Parents gave tearful interviews. A few conspiracy theories began to float. Pirates, human trafficking, an elaborate prank gone wrong. Some claimed the kids had faked their own disappearance. But those theories quickly fell apart. All their belongings were still in their dorms. None of their bank accounts had been touched. Their social security numbers went unused. They had simply vanished. The 4 teachers, Mr. Hale, Miss Corwin, Mr. Fitch, and Miss Greener, held for further questioning. But they remained consistent. They remembered nothing between the first morning and the return trip. A psychiatrist brought in by the state proposed dissociative amnesia, possibly triggered by trauma. But when asked what trauma, he had no answer. The most unnerving part came from a detail none of the investigators could ignore. Each of the 4 adults had reset wristwatches, not just off by a few hours, fully reset, blank screens, as if they had never been set at all. More curiously, they each wore their watches on the opposite wrist from usual. Left-handed teachers now had them on the right-handed on the left. They didn't remember changing them. None of them did. A week after the disappearance, the investigation began to shift tone. The energy that once fueled frantic searches was now laced with unease. Not because there were new leads, but because there were none. Every piece of evidence, the Reebok shoe, the GPS data, even the boat's engine log, suddenly confirmed that the class had gone to Anchor Cay, and then nothing. The FBI took over the case. They interviewed every surviving member of Gulf Shores Academy's faculty, every dock worker, groundskeeper, and parent. They found no signs of premeditation, no cult behavior, no strange beliefs, but they did uncover something else. 1 month before the trip, a maintenance worker at the school, Carlos Mendoza Field, a report about a series of strange noises coming from the computer lab late at night. He claimed he heard multiple voices chanting, followed by a high-pitched ringing sound that made his vision blur. The report had been quietly dismissed by administration. Carlos was later fired for reasons unrelated to the trip, but in a taped interview, he recounted what he saw that night. "I looked through the little glass window. The room was dark, but there were shadows, long ones, like they were stretching across the floor. I swear to God, they were moving without people, just sliding along like snakes. No students were ever tied to the incident. The computer lab itself had no security cameras, and no other reports were filed. But the memory lingered." Parents began to push for a civil investigation. Several hired private detectives. Some believed the school had covered up warning signs. Others suspected the boat's captain had played a larger role than he claimed. John Meade, the captain, had become nearly catatonic by then. He refused interviews, wouldn't eat. According to a nurse assigned to his care, he would sometimes whisper a single phrase in the middle of the night. "Don't look at the water. Don't look at the water. Don't look at the water." In September of that year, he was found dead in his home from apparent self-inflicted injuries. On his bathroom mirror, written in soap, were 3 words. They weren't kids. After Captain Meade's death, the tone of the case shifted again this time, from investigative to speculative. With no bodies, no evidence of foul play, and no criminal charges, the official inquiry stalled. But the families didn't. In late 1992, a coalition of parents formed a group called the Anchor 31 Foundation, with one goal: to uncover the truth behind their children's disappearance. They funded independent researchers, psychics, even deep-sea divers. Most of those efforts led nowhere, except for one. A private marine survey team, hired in March of '93, discovered something roughly 2 miles southwest of Anchor Cay, beneath 80 feet of water, a rusted metal pole protruding vertically from the sea floor, wrapped in what looked like seaweed and decaying plastic. Divers retrieved part of the material. Lab analysis revealed it was a Gulf Shores Academy windbreaker, standard issue for the class of '92, with the initials KH written on the tag. That matched a student named Kyle Henderson, but there was no sign of Kyle himself. No bones, no other clothing, Just that polar rusted, buried deep, and anchored with unnatural precision into the rock bed. One diver described the site as more like a marker than debris. When the discovery was shared with the authorities, the official reaction was muted. The pole was dismissed as a likely remnant from an old mooring system, and no further dives were authorized. But one investigator, former Detective Bill Carver, now working freelance, kept digging. In a taped interview from 1995, Carver claimed he had found records of an identical pole installed in 1968 on a different island, St. Thomas Key, 40 miles away. That pole had also been discovered during a missing persons case. That case involved 3 teenagers who vanished on a church retreat. None of them were ever found. The most disturbing part? That island, St. Thomas Key, was listed in old Coast Guard maps under a different name, Anchor K. The name had been moved, as if the island itself hadn't stayed in one place. By the summer of 1996, 4 years had passed. Most people had moved on. Gulf Shores Academy had quietly shut down. The remaining staff either retired or relocated. Some students from lower grades transferred elsewhere, though many parents refused to let their younger children return at all. But then something happened that reignited everything. On the 12th of August, a park ranger named Travis Langley, patrolling a wildlife refuge 50 miles north of Anchor K, came across something washed ashore in the early morning fog. It was a plastic container sun-bleached, barnacle-covered, half buried in sand. Inside was a cassette tape, sealed in a vacuum bag, alongside a piece of paper with only 2 words: "Play me." The tape was given to local police. Within days, it made its way to the Anchor 31 Foundation. What they heard changed everything. The audio quality was poor, warped by age and exposure, but it was unmistakably a human voice, young, male, panicked. "This is Kyle. I don't know how much time I have. We're alive, some of us. I think we're not on the same island anymore. They took us somewhere else. Not by boat, I swear. We went to sleep, and when we woke up, the trees were different. The sky looked wrong. It's not... If anyone gets this, don't come here. Don't look for us. They're not done with us." There was a pause, then breathing, then silence. At the end of the tape, a second voice quiet, almost a whisper came through. Not panicked, calm, controlled. A girl's voice. "You're listening, aren't you?" Then nothing. The tape was authenticated by multiple forensic labs. The voice was confirmed as Kyle Henderson's based on home video comparisons and vocal profile analysis. He had been declared legally dead 2 years prior. No one could explain how his voice ended up in a sealed container, washed ashore hundreds of kilometers from where he vanished. And no one could explain what he meant by not the same island anymore, except maybe one person, Detective Bill Carver. When shown the transcript, he simply muttered, "That's what I was afraid of." 2 weeks after the tape surfaced, former Detective Bill Carver agreed to a private interview with a local news station. He had avoided the press for years, refusing comment on anything related to the Anchor K case. But this time, he didn't hesitate. The interview was never aired, but a partial transcript, leaked later by a technician, revealed disturbing details the public had never been told. Carver believed the island the students had visited was not fixed in place geographically or otherwise. He referenced historical Coast Guard charts showing the appearance and disappearance of small land masses over the past century, many of them noted briefly and then quietly removed from updated maps. Several had appeared near Florida. Several share the same dimensions. He also referenced an internal memo from 1971, filed by a military researcher during an exercise off the Gulf Coast. It described a landform exhibiting anomalous magnetic readings that did not persist in satellite imagery. Carver believed these sightings were of the same island, and he believed something was using it. In his words, "It's a kind of decoy, a lure. You go to it thinking it's land, thinking it's normal, but it's not. And if you stay long enough, you don't come back. When asked what he meant by not normal, Carver described a theory that the island itself was not a place, but a threshold. A thin point between two realities. Somewhere or something was using it to observe, or harvest, or test. He couldn't prove any of it, but he had pages of coordinates, witness reports, satellite gaps, and then he dropped a final detail. 2 months after the Anchor 31 disappearance, a Coast Guard patrol completely unrelated to the case reported seeing children standing on the shoreline of an uncharted island near Cuba. Naked, motionless, just watching. By the time they approached, the island had vanished. Not just the children, the island. They recorded the sighting in their log, filed it, and were told not to mention it again. Carver ended the interview with a warning. If you ever find it, Anchor K or whatever it really is, don't go ashore. Don't even drop anchor. Because once it sees you, it remembers. In the spring of 2000, 10 years after the disappearance, the Anchor 31 Foundation received an anonymous package postmarked from a small town in Mississippi. No return address. Inside was a VHS tape, wrapped in wax paper and labeled only with the number 92. The foundation, long dormant and reduced to a few grieving families and one surviving board member, debated whether it was a prank, but curiosity won. They borrowed an old television and player, inserted the tape, and pressed play. The footage was degraded. Static bled into the corners of the frame. But what was visible was unmistakable. It opened on a beach. Not a tourist beach knot, the kind with umbrellas and towels. The sand was too dark, the sky had a dull green tint, the trees in the background looked wrong. Bent, thick, too many roots. In the center of the frame stood a group of teenagers. Silent, barefoot, covered in sand. Their clothes tattered and mismatched. Some wore Gulf Shores Academy t-shirts, but faded to near white. There were 20, maybe 25 of them, all thin, still, staring directly into the camera. One boy stepped forward. The image sharpened just enough to recognize the face. It was Jeremy Lutz. Varsity soccer, missing since June 1992. His lips moved, no sound. Then a brief cut. A flash of something white, a hand maybe. Then static. The next frame showed a new angle. The same group, now seated in a wide circle in the sand. Heads bowed. Some had painted markings on their faces. In the center of the circle, a figure, curled on its side, thin, wrapped in blankets, shaking. It was impossible to tell if the person was alive. Then, one final cut. The camera was in motion now, approaching the forest line. The trees looked closer than before, much closer. And just before the footage ended, a face entered the frame, sudden, unblinking, inches from the lens. It wasn't a student. It was an adult woman, smiling faintly, her eyes milky white, her skin stretched unnaturally tight across her cheeks. She leaned in and whispered, "We made it through." Then static, then black. The tape was turned over to the FBI. No public comment was ever made, but the only known copy was never returned to the families. A week later, the remaining members of the Anchor 31 Foundation disbanded permanently. One father, in a letter to a journalist, wrote, "We saw them. They're older now. Different, but alive. I don't know if that's better or worse." After the VHS surfaced, there was a brief flurry of renewed interest in the case. A few online message boards, mostly early paranormal forums, picked up on the footage and began dissecting it frame by frame. Grainy stills were posted. Names were matched to the faces. Parents debated whether the tape was genuine or an elaborate hoax. But within a few months, the discussion died again. There was nothing new to follow. No return address, no confirmation. The FBI remained silent until someone else came forward. In 2003, a man named Elliot Parr, a former shipping coordinator based in Louisiana, contacted an independent journalist with an unusual story. He claimed that in 1992, while captaining a small private vessel through the Gulf, he had passed a low island that wasn't on any chart. Nothing strange about that shoals and sandbars come and go. But he noticed something odd through his binoculars. There were people on it, or kids, maybe, but they were just standing there, shoulder to shoulder, facing the water, like statues, dozens of them, not moving. He didn't stop. He kept sailing. But what stuck with him was what he saw behind them. In the tree line stood something tall, humanoid, pale, not watching the sea watching them. He didn't report it at the time. He chalked it up to exhaustion, maybe heat stroke. But when he saw a still from the VHS tape published online a decade later, he recognized the kids immediately. It was them, the same ones. I'd stake my life on it. The journalist verified his identity. Elliot had no criminal record, no financial motive. He refused money. He just wanted someone to believe him. He died 2 years later from heart failure. But before his death, he sent a package to the same journalist. Inside was a hand-drawn map based on his 1,992 route, with a point marked, not there on the way out, there on the way back. The location? Roughly 14 miles southeast of where Anchor Cay was originally recorded. The problem? That entire area had been scanned hundreds of times. There was no island there. Not anymore. But satellites archived from 1992 showed something strange. A blurry, flickering mass in that very spot. No shape, no color, just interference. As if the satellite couldn't quite see what was there, or wasn't supposed to. In 2005, 13 years after the class vanished, a woman named Meredith Allen stepped forward with something no one expected: a journal. She claimed she had purchased a used hiking backpack at a flea market in Ocala, Florida. Inside one of the lining compartments stitched closed, she found a small weatherproof notebook. The first page read, "If found, please don't stop reading." The pages were warped, the ink smeared, but much of it was legible. It was written in the hand of Kristen Renner, one of the missing students. What followed were 53 pages of disjointed, desperate entries. Some clear, some barely decipherable. But one message repeated again and again: this place changes when it wants to. Kristen described waking up in a tent to find the shoreline had moved, that stars disappeared one by one, that some students couldn't remember their own names after the third night. She said the teachers were not the same anymore, that they began speaking in reverse sentences and then stopped speaking altogether. Most disturbing were the drawings. In between paragraphs were crude sketches, trees with roots shaped like hands, a massive doorframe buried in sand, and something she only ever labeled as the Thin Man. He appeared in nearly every entry, tall, pale, watching. One line read, "He doesn't walk. He just appears closer every time you blink." The last entry was a single sentence, scrawled diagonally across 2 pages, the pen digging hard into the paper. "We didn't get lost. We got chosen." Experts authenticated the handwriting matching it to Kristen's known assignments and yearbook entries. No one could explain how the journal ended up in Ocala. Meredith, shaken, mailed it to the FBI and never spoke publicly again. But for the families, it was the first undeniable evidence that their children had been there, had experienced something, and had at least for a wild treat to fight it. Still, the question lingered. If Kristen wrote the journal, who sewed it into a backpack and sold it at a flea market? Following the release of Kristen's journal, 2 things happened almost immediately. First, a handful of online conspiracy communities latched onto the drawings, particularly the image of the Thin Man. They compared it to folklore from around the world: shadow beings, forest spirits, extra-dimensional watchers. Theories ranged from ancient entities to government experiments to psychological projection. Second, a retired air traffic controller named Ronald Park came forward with a strange admission. He claimed that on the 4th of June, 1992, the day after the students arrived at Anchor Cay, he received a series of emergency pings from an unregistered transponder about 80 miles offshore. What made it strange was that the signal kept moving, not drifting, not floating. It was jumping. 1 minute it was near the coast. Next it was 20 miles west, then back again. He reported it to his supervisor, but was told the equipment was probably malfunctioning. The report was never filed, until he saw the map tied to the VHS tape years later. It matched the exact coordinates of the signal he tracked that night. When asked why he waited over a decade to say anything, Park replied, "Because I thought no one would believe that an island could move. I still don't." But even stranger was what he saw on the radar the following night, the 5th of June, 1992 at 2:07 a.m., less than 10 hours before the boat returned empty. For 7 seconds, there was nothing but black. Every screen, every channel. We call it a radial blackout. It's never happened before or since. Nothing there, but we could still hear static. And one word. A transmission had come through, faint, looping, repeat, repeat, repeat. Then everything returned to normal. And no one at the FAA ever gave him an answer. But the timestamp of the blackout, 2:07 a.m., matched exactly the time the captain's log restarted. The moment the crew woke up and began sailing back, whatever happened that night happened all at once. And maybe not in this world alone. By 2010, the story of the Gulf Shores class had faded from national attention. The case remained open but cold. The families aged. Websites went dark. Most people, if they remembered the story at all, remembered it as a rumor. But then came the Laughlin tape. In November of that year, a tech blogger named Nathan Laughlin uploaded a video to a now defunct forum, claiming he had recovered it from an old backup drive pulled from a decommissioned Coast Guard computer. The video was short, under 2 minutes, no audio. Timestamped the 5th of June, 1992 6 hours, 2 minutes and 41 seconds. The footage was black and white, likely infrared, captured from a low-flying surveillance plane conducting a routine sweep. It showed the boat, the same charter boat that had carried the students. It was drifting slowly away from the island. No one was visible on board. But on the shoreline facing the water stood 3 lines of people. Not students, not adults. Figures, tall, thin, motionless, unnaturally still. Each row had 9 or 10 of them, spaced evenly apart as if arranged. Their heads slightly tilted, their arms unnaturally long. No facial features distinguishable, just silhouettes in the heat signature. And then at frame 142, one of them turns sharply and looks directly toward the sky. Toward the camera, the footage jitters. The screen warps, and then the video cuts. The original forum where the file was posted disappeared within 48 hours. The domain name was erased from web archives. Laughlin's account was deleted. No one ever heard from him again. The file circulated on conspiracy forums for a few weeks, but most copies became corrupted. The surviving versions are fractured, distorted, or freeze before the figures appear. Some still insist the video was a hoax. Others say it was Reland, the last clear evidence of what was left behind on that island. The FBI has never acknowledged the footage, but internal memos leaked years later reference an operation codenamed K-Watch Status, redacted. In 2017, nearly 25 years after the disappearance, a man named Lucas Hanley uploaded a video to a private Vimeo link and shared it with only 3 people. One of FEMA former investigative journalist named Dara Keenaleaked it. The video showed Hanley, now in his 40s, sitting in a dark room. He looked thin, with sun-damaged skin and deep lines under his eyes. He claimed to be one of the students from the class of '92. Not dead, not lost, not taken, left behind. He spoke slowly, as if each word was being chosen through a fog. We were split. Half of us stayed near the beach. The rest, they went inland. That was the last time I saw them. The teachers changed first. Their voices stopped working. Their eyes stayed open even when they slept. I tried to leave. I walked for 2 days and ended up back at the same place. The beach was wrong. The water was wrong. Then he said something no one could explain. The island doesn't float, it listens. According to Hanley, one night there was a sound low, metallic, like a horn or a breath beneath the ground. After that, the sky began changing colors. The trees shifted their shape. Some of the students simply wandered off into the forest and didn't come back. Others stopped speaking entirely. They didn't die, they just changed their mind about being human. When asked how he escaped, Hanley said he didn't. He said the island let him go, but only after he made it forget his name. He tattooed false names across his body, cut away pieces of clothing that had initials, burned photographs. He repeated new names to himself over and over until he no longer remembered who he had been. Then one morning, he was in the water, floating. Sunlight, real sky. A fisherman picked him up 10 miles off the coast of Belize. He never told anyone, not until now. I don't think I brought it with me, he said at the end of the video. But sometimes, when I sleep, I can hear it remembering. Within a month, Hanley was found dead in his apartment. No signs of trauma, no drugs. Just a note on his bathroom mirror, too late, it knows again. After Lucas Hanley's death, there were no more messages, no more tapes. The remaining families, now aging into their 70s, had mostly given up hope some, even stopped speaking publicly altogether. But the case didn't die, because that same year, 2017, a Department of the Interior satellite captured something that reignited internal attention. It was a thermal scan taken during a routine pass over the Gulf of Mexico. In one frame, barely visible, was a small crescent-shaped landmass where no island had been recorded in over a decade. 2 hours later, in the same coordinates, it was gone. All that remained in the infrared was a strange cluster of heat, signatures concentrated, tall, vertical, spaced evenly in a ring. That image was never released to the public. It was labeled unexplained anomaly and stored under a classification tag. But someone leaked it. A low-resolution version ended up online, posted anonymously with the message, "There's still information." That phrase triggered a wave of reinvestigation by a small group of online researchers, many of whom had been following the Anchor 31 case for years. One of them, an archivist known only as 11 Rooms, claimed to have found a decommissioned Coast Guard logbook that included an unusual entry dated the 6th of June, 1992, the day after the boat returned. The page listed coordinates near the original location of Anchor K. Next to it, in red ink, "Still humming. Not recommended for approach." And beneath that, a final handwritten note, "Do not disturb the ring." No further explanation was provided. To this day, no new expeditions have been granted clearance to that area of the Gulf. The water near the original site is now designated as a wildlife protection zone, off limits to all commercial and civilian traffic. No species have ever been observed living there. No fish, no birds, nothing. It is officially a dead zone. But satellites show something else. The water still ripples outward from a center that isn't there. 30 years have passed. No bodies were ever recovered. No official cause of disappearance was ever recorded. The names of the 31 students remain engraved on a granite monument behind the grounds of what used to be Gulf Shores Academia building, now overgrown, shuttered, and silent. The case file is closed. The missing are still listed as presumed dead. But some things never stay buried. In early 2022, a NOAA research buoy in the Gulf of Mexico began malfunctioning. Technicians recovered it for diagnostics and discovered that its internal clock had reset to the 3rd of June, 1992. Its GPS showed it had drifted nearly 60 miles inland impossible for a deep-sea device anchored to the ocean floor. Its final transmission contained only one word: repeat. And then it went dark. The file was quietly buried. Funding for further research in that zone was redirected, and those who asked too many questions were told the buoy had suffered saltwater memory corruption. But the pattern continues. Every few years, a flare on a satellite, a glitched frequency, a signal with no origin, and sometimes a voice garbled, layered, barely audible, always saying the same thing: we made it through. It is now believed by those still watching that the students of Gulf Shores did not die. Not all of them. Some remained, some changed, and some may no longer be students at all. They are out there somewhere beyond what maps can hold, living on an island that isn't an island, waiting